Good morning all, I hope you're all well. You're going to receive your Home Learning Pack 5 shortly, and to support you in completing these, I'm going to go through how they can be used effectively. Before we start, here is some points to help you if you get stuck. You can use BBC Bite Size, which is an excellent online resource. If you still can't access the work, please use the student email for science and I will get back to you shortly. Your next pack will contain the following: knowledge organisers, project-based study, and reading tasks. The knowledge organisers are something that you are used to using at school. We use them in school as home learning all the time. The knowledge organiser are an important part of the curriculum at John Wilmot. Knowledge organisers consist of main points of the topic that are taught. These can help you to consolidate learning, retrieve key points, act as a prompt to the main areas that are taught. I'm going to go through with you a Year 9 knowledge organiser. Science organisers are the same for all year groups, so we can all use these in the same way. So if we look, the knowledge organisers are divided into the key areas you will learn in each topic. They have key terms you will need to learn with definitions, the sections of the different strands taught within the topics. The key terms are very, very important. The key terms will help you to access the learning in the classroom, but also help you to access exam-style questions. This is what your teacher is preparing you for. If you can understand what the key terms mean, you will understand what questions are asking, but also enables you to use these in your answers. To make sure you learn these, you can do this by making revision cards. So to learn it, you need to use revision cards. You can put the words on one side and the definition on the back. Get your parents or your friends to test you afterwards. The knowledge sections are then split up into 4 sections, and these are based around the key areas within the topic. If you look at this Year 9 one, you can see that the 4 main areas that you need to know are atmosphere, the carbon cycle, greenhouse effect, and atmospheric pollutants. Each section contains a small amount of information. They contain the backbones of what you need to know to prepare you for learning in the classroom, tests in school, and fundamentally that external exam in Year 11. In Year 7 and 8, the knowledge organisers prepares you for Key Stage 4. If you can access Key Stage 3 learning, you are more likely to be successful at Key Stage 4. We need to remember that although you are taught content at school, your teacher will check for the understanding, but the learning comes from that retrieval of information. Your ability to remove that information, your ability to move information you have learned from your working memory to the long-term memory. This comes from the constant revisiting of the concepts and doing something with it. I'm going to explain how you can do this. So the first section looks at the atmosphere. This section has some key information. Firstly, you need to think about what you already know about the early atmosphere and compare it to today's atmosphere. Some key information is stated here. The early atmosphere, about 200 million years ago, there was lots of volcanic activity. So use this as a hook. If there was lots of volcanic activity, the water available would have been locked up as water vapour, and volcanic activity emits lots of gases such as carbon dioxide. If there was no usable water and lots of carbon dioxide, then animals and plants would not have existed. So what changed? Volcanic activity stopped, they subsided. The atmosphere cooled and water vapour condensed and became oceans. Here we have water. As a result of that, small microscopic organisms such as bacteria would have formed. These use photosynthesis, and we know that photosynthesis removes carbon dioxide and produces oxygen as a waste gas. So the carbon dioxide levels would have decreased and oxygen levels would have increased. Therefore, the atmosphere would have changed to something like we know today. where the carbon dioxide levels are lower and the oxygen levels are much higher. As a result of that, more complex organisms would have evolved. So we need to think about how we could use that information here to act as that promise. What background knowledge do you already have, and how can you use this to hook new learning? I'm going to start thinking about how we can present this information. This one here gives information about the early atmosphere and today's atmosphere. So we need to compare the differences. Now we can use here a bubble map, and bubble maps are good ways to present or chunk this information to help to move it from that working memory to the long-term memory. So what we can do, we can place in the centre the key points: early atmosphere and today's atmosphere. Around the outside, you could identify some differences. The centre, you could identify the similarities. This is what you'd expect to know for a grade 4. And once you've done this, you can then use this information to describe in the boxes below the differences and similarities between early and today's atmosphere. This would help you to achieve that grade 6 or 7 because you're applying the understanding to a concept. At grade 7, 8 or 9, you may be asked to explain how these gases changed in the environment and the effects of this on the atmosphere. Using this type of bubble map, thinking map, which will help you to condense key points into something more usable. The next bullet point is looking at the carbon cycle. And here you can see this is in the format of a diagram. And we've got two of these here. We've got the carbon cycle and we've got the greenhouse effect. Now, diagrams are a good way to help you to remember science concepts. Diagrams and explanations, they tickle your senses and uses your auditory and your visual senses. Greater chances that you will remember it. You need to use these diagrams to explain a concept. The two you can see explains the carbon cycle and the greenhouse effect. You need to know about both of these processes. So here you need to say what you can see. Use the diagrams to say what you can see. Two ways to do this: you could cut out the diagrams, and around that diagram you can put some information about what you see. What do you see in that diagram? Then place it into a table. It condenses or chunks that information. The final part on this knowledge organiser is all about atmospheric pollutants. These are just numbered key points. Now, what I'd advise you to do here is to skim read through this and look for the pollutants. And we can see that the pollutants there are carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and then particles of carbon in the atmosphere. Once you've skimmed it, you then need to think about how this affected the human health. How does this affect human health? So I put this again onto probably a table, condensing and chunking that information, which will help it to be more usable for you in the future. Now, once you've done all this with all this information, you then need to start thinking about revisiting it on a regular basis. The more you revisit, the greater chance you will have to learn it, moving it from the working memory to the long-term memory, and thereby ensuring that you can retrieve the exam. Now, the final bit, once you've done all that and you've gone through your knowledge organiser, you've tested some of that information, you've revisited it on a regular basis, you can then produce another type of thinking map. Now, this thinking map allows you to identify the topic that you've been taught and the strengths. And the two strands from that particular organiser looks at the early atmosphere and climate change. Then for each strand, you need to identify the key ideas you have learned. This is condensing and making sure that you understand completely what the main concept of the topic is. Finally, on the back of your knowledge organiser, you will see that we have some questions. These questions are split up into 3 sections: know it, grasp it, think it. Now, what I'd advise you to do is I'd advise you, once you've learnt all that information, is to have a go at these questions without looking at your notes. If you can do this, you give yourself a gold star. You have truly learned the key ideas. I advise that you start with the know it questions. These are what we would describe as being a single mark question on an exam. If you can answer these questions confidently, you're more likely to be able to achieve those single mark questions. And they look at definitions and then identifying processes. As we move through to the grasp bit, they require you to describe and explain the science. And that's quite important as well, because we need to be able to do that in our exam, describing and explaining processes. This is the application. It applies the understanding to those difficult concepts. Again, these would give you the questions that form part of the later grade 7 to 9 type questions that you would get in your exam. To complete, you could use some of the skills I have discussed. So if you don't understand a concept, use your knowledge organiser, place it into your bubble maps, tables, produce those retrieval cards, which will help you later. The second part of your learning packs consists of these project-based learning. So I'm going to run through just one with you. This is the Year 9 one, and it looks at making links between what we call the old learning to concepts in the real world. So if we look at this one, it's called Genius Glasses. From Year 8, you would have learnt about how light travels. We know that mirrors reflect light. Transparent materials such as glass allows the light to pass through it. What happens to the light as it passes through denser materials? So from air to solid. If you are asked to draw a diagram, you need to make sure that you label that diagram and you pop in things like arrows. You're asked here to draw the pathway of light through the lens. Then for the lenses, you need to then apply that knowledge and understanding to be able to identify which type of glasses that would be used to correct the vision of a person that's short-sighted or long-sighted. The final task that we have here today is what we call a reading task. Now, the reading is really, really important, and I'm sure lots of you would have done reading throughout the lockdown period. Now, the reading task tests your comprehension, and there's a couple of skills that you will need here in order to be able to complete this particular task. Now, the first part asks you to scan through the content and pull out some key information that you need in order to be able to answer questions. The final bit is where you have to read it properly, and reading it properly in depth will help you to answer the more complex comprehension questions. Here, you'll need to apply some of that text to be able to answer these questions. I look forward to seeing you all again soon. But all I can say for now is happy learning, speak soon, bye bye.